The office clock ticked like a heartbeat in the silence. 11:15, and I was already sweating under the flickering fluorescent light. The motel lot outside seemed unnaturally still, just the faint hum of a distant truck engine on Highway 95, swallowed quickly by the towering pines that boxed in the clearing. I tried to convince myself it was just a quiet night, but the air smelled raw, like iron and wet wood, a sharp scent that made the back of my throat tighten. I ran through the rules again. Room 2, never investigate screams. Pool at 3 a.m., politely ask guests to leave. Even-numbered rooms only. Avoid room 5, and never, ever approach the dogs. My stomach nodded at that last one. They're not dogs, Luna's voice echoed in my head. The first guest of the night arrived shortly after 11:30. A tired-looking man in a leather jacket rolled down his window as he parked. Even-numbered room, please, I said, trying to sound casual, handing him the key to room 6. His eyes lingered on mine for a moment too long. You work here alone? He asked, his voice low. Yes, I lied. Night shift. He nodded slowly, then smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. Something about him felt off, like he had already seen things no one else could. He drove off toward his room, headlights bouncing over the gravel. The rest of the hour crawled. I ran the register, filled out logs, and stared at the supply closet key on my ring, wondering what kind of emergency could justify using it. Then, around midnight, I heard it. A scream, not from any guest, but from the darkness near room 2. My hand froze on the mouse. It was a long, high-pitched wail that clawed at my skull. The rules screamed at me in my memory. Do not investigate. I swallowed hard, my palms slick with sweat, and turned my chair toward the monitor. The security cameras flickered to life, grainy black and white images showing the lot, the pool, and the hallway to room 2. Nothing moved. No light, no figure, just the static hum of the feed. And then I saw it, a shadow, impossibly tall and thin, slipping past the edge of the camera near room 2's door. It didn't move like a human. It didn't move like anything I knew. My stomach dropped. I wanted to look away, to shake myself, but my eyes were glued to the screen. At 12,005, the shadow vanished. The scream stopped. Silence returned. But I knew deep down that the rules weren't just suggestions. They were lifelines, and breaking them, even by curiosity, was no longer a theoretical danger. I shivered and checked the clock. 2 hours to go until the pool routine. 2 hours in this place that already felt alive in ways it shouldn't be. I wasn't just working the night shift at the Pineview Motel. I was trapped inside it. The hours dragged, each one heavier than the last. The office felt smaller with every tick of the clock, the shadows stretching across the walls like living things. I kept reminding myself of the rules, repeating them silently. A mantra. Room 2, never investigate. Pool at 3:30 a.m., even rooms only. Room 5, forbidden, do not approach the dogs. The last one made my stomach turn whenever I thought about it, but I forced my focus on the task ahead, the pool. At 2:00 a.m., I gathered the flashlight from the supply closet and the clipboard Luna had left on the desk. I tried to ignore the hairs rising on my arms as I stepped out into the icy night air. Fog rolled in from the tree line, curling around the gravel like fingers reaching for me. The motel's neon sign flickered weakly, half of its letters dead, but it cast enough light to outline the pool's chain-link fence. I unlocked the gate and walked along the wet concrete, the smell of chlorine sharp in the cold night air. My breath puffed out in white clouds. The pool was still, unnaturally still, almost like a black mirror reflecting the faint glow of the office lights. I squinted. Nothing, no guests, not even a ripple. Then, at exactly 3:02 a.m., I heard it, a splash. A single, deliberate splash followed by the faint echo of laughter or maybe a whisper, but it carried through the fog. I froze, gripping the flashlight so tightly my knuckles whitened. My mind screamed, "Do not investigate! Hello!" I called, my voice cracking. No answer, just the sound of water lapping against the edge. I hesitated, remembering Rule 2, politely ask them to leave if anyone is in the pool. Only a 10-minute window. My pulse pounded in my ears as I scanned the pool. A figure emerged, too tall, too thin, moving in a jerky, unnatural way. Its face was obscured by the fog, but I could see the faint shimmer of wet skin under the moonlight. I forced myself to step forward, raising my flashlight. "Sir, or ma'am, you need to get out," I said, my voice barely steady. The figure stopped, tilted its head, and laughed. A sound like metal scraping against glass. My stomach dropped. Its eyes, if they were eyes, shone bright white in the darkness, unblinking, unhuman. And it did, slowly, almost reluctantly, slithering back into the black water until nothing remained but ripples. I shut the gate behind me and backed toward the office, sweat cooling rapidly on my skin. The clipboard in my hands felt heavier than it should, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even as I sat back down under the buzzing fluorescent lights. 2 hours still to sunrise. 2 hours trapped in a motel that didn't belong entirely to the living. I forced my eyes on the monitor, but I knew I hadn't just survived the night. I had only followed the rules, and that, I realized, might not be enough. The hours after the pool routine were the hardest. The motel's quiet was no longer comforting. It pressed down on me, thick and suffocating. Each creak of the office floorboards sounded like a footstep in the dark. I kept glancing at the hallway camera, staring at the stretch of carpet that led toward room 2, the place I was strictly forbidden to investigate. I tried to focus on mundane tasks, filling out logs, checking in late-night guests, restocking supplies, but my thoughts kept drifting. The scream from the first night played on loop in my head, a sound that seemed both distant and horrifyingly close. "Don't go there, Donald! Don't go there!" I whispered to myself, repeating Luna's warning, but curiosity was a thorn pressing at the edge of my mind. At 1045 a.m., I noticed something strange on the monitor. Room 2's door. The camera gave a clear line of sight, was slightly ajar. Just a crack, but enough for shadow to leak into the hallway. I froze, heart hammering. I knew the rule, never investigate. But my body moved before my brain could stop it. I leaned closer to the monitor, squinting. A figure appeared in the doorway, not human. Its shape was elongated, limbs bending at impossible angles, its head tilted as if listening to something only it could hear. I felt the blood drain from my face. The office suddenly felt colder. The coffee I'd poured earlier went lukewarm in my hand, and a metallic scent like blood or rust hung in the air. I forced myself to back away. Rule 1, Rule 1, Rule 1. I repeated it over and over. My fingers hovered over the phone, the instinct to call the sheriff itching at me, but Luna's words echoed, "Follow the rules exactly, or disappear like Devin!" The figure lingered, unmoving, then slowly withdrew into room 2. The door clicked shut behind it, leaving only silence, and the faintest sound of whispering, so low I couldn't catch the words. My stomach churned, my palms slick. I glanced at the clock, 2003 a.m., too early for the pool, too late to sleep. I considered turning on every light, screaming for someone, anything. But instead, I sat in the office, gripping the edge of the desk like it was a lifeline, telling myself that survival meant obedience. That's all I could do, follow the rules, stay alive, and hope the night didn't demand more. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Every shadow felt like it could step off the monitor, every creak of the building a warning. By 3:30 a.m., I had to leave for the pool again, but I didn't move right away. I stared at room 2's door, feeling a sense of dread that went beyond fear. Something alive and patient waited behind it, something that Devin had ignored. And I knew, deep down, I wouldn't last 15 years like him. The pool had been quiet that night. No splash, no laughter, no lingering presence. But the relief was fleeting. By 4 a.m., the motel felt different, like it had shifted while I was outside. The shadows in the lot were thicker now, and the wind had picked up, rustling the pine trees in uneven, whispering rhythms. I tried to focus on the paperwork, but every creak of the office door and every distant sound outside made my skin crawl. Then I heard it, a low growl, barely audible at first, like the wind had teeth. I froze, listening. The sound grew sharper, closer, coming from the parking lot. Rule 5, do not approach any dogs in the parking lot. They are not dogs. My stomach turned over. I knew Luna meant it literally. They are not dogs. I glanced out the office window. 2 figures crouched near the edge of the lot, just beyond the reach of the neon light. At first I thought they were dogs, big, dark, with low, glowing eyes, but the shapes were wrong. Too tall, too thin, limbs bent in ways that made my head spin. Their growls were guttural, almost human in cadence. I pressed back into the safety of the office, sliding the emergency key from my pocket and holding it like a talisman. I didn't know what had opened, but somehow I hoped it might be protection. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I considered the consequences of stepping outside. Devin hadn't touched the lot during his last shift. That had been part of why he lasted 15 years. The figures moved closer, gliding rather than running, silent except for the low rumble of their throats. I could see now that their mouths were too wide, their teeth jagged and glinting in the neon glow. One tilted its head at the office window, and I felt its gaze pierce through me like a knife. My hand shook so violently I almost dropped the key. I turned to the camera feed. Nothing. The monitor showed empty asphalt, empty shadows. I realized then that these creatures, these dogs, were not bound by the cameras, not bound by normal rules of space. I sat down hard in my chair, gripping the edge of the desk, repeating the mantra in my head, "Do not approach, do not approach. Do not approach." My chest tightened and I shivered as I felt them lingering, patient, outside, waiting for the wrong move. Hours remained until sunrise. The night was far from over, and I understood one thing with chilling clarity. Obedience was survival, but the motel itself was alive, and it knew I was afraid. By 5 a.m., the motel had grown oppressive. The fluorescent light buzzed above me, and the shadows along the walls stretched like long, hungry fingers. My body was exhausted, but I couldn't sleep, couldn't stop thinking about the shapes I had seen in the lot. Every noise, the creak of a floorboard, the rustle of pine needles outside, felt amplified, deliberate. Then the phone rang, sharp, jarring. My hand froze over the receiver. No one ever called at this hour. I glanced at the monitor. All the cameras showed empty rooms and empty hallways. Slowly, I lifted the receiver. "Hello?" My voice was hoarse. A woman's voice whispered back, soft but urgent. Room 5. I need room 5." I felt my stomach drop. Rule 4. If anyone requests room 5, give them room 8 and offer a complimentary breakfast. Do not explain why. My pulse quickened. "Yes, ma'am," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Room 8 is ready. I'll make sure breakfast is included." There was a pause on the line, then a click. The receiver felt heavy in my hand. I knew better than to question it. Room 5 had a reputation, though Luna hadn't told me exactly why. But everyone knew, or at least everyone who worked nights knew. I checked the monitor. Room 8 was empty. Good. Safe. But the hallway leading to room 5 seemed darker somehow, as if the light itself avoided it. My eyes lingered longer than they should have, drawn to the door with a magnetic pull I couldn't explain. Then I heard it. Soft at first, almost imperceptible, a dragging sound, carpet brushing against the floor. It came from the direction of room 5. My hands tightened on the edge of the desk. My brain screamed to ignore it, to follow the rules, but curiosity clawed at me like a living thing. I turned toward the emergency key in my pocket. My fingers brushed the cold metal, wondering if it could somehow protect me. The dragging grew louder, followed by a low, gurgling whisper, words I couldn't understand but felt deep in my chest. I forced myself to sit down, to stay behind the desk. "Do not investigate. Do not investigate. Do not investigate." Sweat soaked my shirt, my hands were shaking, and I could feel the motel pressing closer around me, as if it could hear my thoughts. The clock ticked. 5:45 a.m., 2 hours until sunrise. I had survived everything so far by following the rules. But room 5, the very mention of it sent shivers down my spine, was a warning. The rules were not just protection, they were limits. The motel would test them, and tonight, I had a feeling it was already beginning. By 6 a.m., the night had become a predator. Every sound felt amplified, the drip of water from the sink, the hum of the fluorescent light, the soft creak of the office chair as I shifted my weight. The motel wasn't quiet anymore. It was alert, aware, and waiting. My stomach churned with a mixture of fatigue and fear, and yet I couldn't stop scanning the monitors. Room 2's door remained shut, still ominously silent. Room 5, I didn't dare glance, but the hallway cameras flickered, and that was when I saw it, a shadow. Not a person, not a guest. Something darker, wider than a human, but strangely thin, moving without making a sound. It slipped along the carpet like liquid, bending around corners, avoiding the light, but always watching. My heart pounded in my chest. I reminded myself of the rules, never investigate. My legs wanted to move, wanted to run, but I stayed rooted behind the desk. The shadow paused, as if sensing me, tilting in a way that made my stomach lurch. Its edges wavered like smoke caught in a draft. My hand shook as I picked up the flashlight from the desk. I didn't need to go out there, I just needed to see. I flicked the beam toward the hallway. The shadow recoiled instantly, melting into the corners, and I felt a presence. Not something outside the office, but something inside me. Something that didn't belong to the world I knew. The air thickened, pressing against my chest. I could taste iron, feel a faint vibration through the floor, as if the motel itself was breathing. Then came the whispering. Low, guttural, unintelligible, but undeniably real. It didn't come from any speaker or vent. It came from everywhere at once. My pulse raced. My eyes darted to the phone, to the emergency key. Could either help? I didn't know. I only knew the rules existed for a reason, and breaking them meant certain disappearance. The shadow advanced a few steps down the hallway, then froze. I stared, unable to look away. A moment later, it recoiled again and vanished, leaving only the echo of the whispering behind. Silence returned. I slumped into my chair, heart hammering, sweat cooling rapidly on my skin. 1 hour until sunrise. 1 hour to survive the final stretch of the night. And I realized something chilling. The rules didn't just protect you from the motel's horrors. They protected the motel from you. Any curiosity, any hesitation, any break in obedience, and you became part of it. Devin hadn't walked into room 2 because he was careless. He had walked because the motel wanted him. And now it was testing me. Sunrise was still an hour away, but the motel had begun to shift again, like a living creature stirring beneath the surface. I tried to keep my eyes on the monitors, but the parking lot cameras betrayed nothing. Still, I felt it, a low, predatory rumble that vibrated through the floorboards of the office. My pulse accelerated. The dogs. I hadn't seen them again since that first encounter earlier in the night, but I could sense them now, close, waiting. They didn't move like normal animals, their limbs twisted unnaturally, their heads tilting in ways that made my stomach twist. And yet, they weren't prowling, they were patient, stalking me with a silent awareness. A sudden metallic scrape against the office door made me jump. My hand shot to the emergency key in my pocket. I wanted to check the peephole to see if the shapes had returned, but Rule 5 repeated itself in my mind. Do not approach the dogs. They are not dogs. I swallowed hard, fingers trembling, and forced myself to step away from the door. The growls intensified, low, guttural, resonant. I could feel the vibrations through the soles of my shoes. The office air thickened, carrying that same metallic, iron-like scent from earlier. My eyes flicked to the window, two of them crouched near the edge of the lot, eyes glowing white in the dim morning light, teeth bared, but impossibly long, sharp, jagged. They weren't dogs, not at all. I gripped the edge of the desk, trying to steady my breathing. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but Luna's words echoed. "Follow the rules, Donald, or disappear like Devon." Minutes passed like hours. The shapes lingered, occasionally tilting their heads as if they could read my thoughts. I realized in a bone-deep way that they weren't waiting for movement. They were waiting for fear, hunger for it. The more terrified I felt, the closer they would come. I sat back down, hands clasped tightly over the desk, repeating the mantra in my head. Do not approach. Do not approach. Do not approach. The growls continued, but slowly, methodically, fading as the first hints of light crept over the horizon. By 6:45 a.m., the shapes finally slunk into the shadows of the tree line. Silence returned, though it was heavier now, oppressive, leaving an aftertaste of dread in the room. I was alive, but barely. I realized something else. The motel wasn't just dangerous, it was sentient. It knew what I feared, what I needed, and it tested every part of me. And the dogs, creatures that were not dogs, were just the beginning. 1 hour left. 1 hour to survive the night without breaking the rules. And I could feel that whatever was waiting in room 5 was ready. By 6:50 a.m., the office felt smaller, suffocating in ways I didn't think possible. The fluorescent lights buzzed like a staccato heartbeat, echoing in the corners of the room. The events of the night weighed on me like stones in my chest. The shadow in the hallway, the dogs in the lot. None of it felt real, yet the lingering metallic scent and the residual vibrations through the floor made it impossible to dismiss. I forced myself to focus on the monitors. Most rooms were empty, even room 8, the one I had assigned to the woman who requested room 5, was quiet. But then my eyes caught it, a faint distortion near room 5's door. The air shimmered like heat over asphalt, and I could swear I saw the door pulse ever so slightly. I tried to look away, forcing myself back into the safe zone behind the desk, but the pull of that door, something primal, something insidious, tugged at my mind. I could hear faint whispers, so soft I almost thought I imagined them. Come closer, look inside. My palms grew sweaty. Rule 4, if anyone requests room 5, give them room 8 instead and offer a complimentary breakfast. Do not explain why. I repeated it in my head, but the whispering wasn't from any guest. It was from the room itself, from whatever haunted it. I realized with sudden clarity that Devon hadn't disappeared out of curiosity. He had answered the pull. He had walked toward the door, toward the thing waiting inside, despite 15 years of experience and warnings. I gritted my teeth, forcing my gaze elsewhere, scanning the monitors obsessively. The lot, the hallway, the pool. It was all normal. But room 5 pulsed in my mind, a quiet insistence that made my skin crawl. I felt my chest tighten as if the room's influence had already begun to seep through the office walls. A faint scratching sound echoed from the hallway near room 5, a rhythm that matched my racing heartbeat. My hands clenched into fists, knuckles whitening. I didn't move. I didn't want to move. I repeated the mantra, do not investigate, do not investigate. The clock ticked closer to 7 a.m. The night shift was nearly over, yet the motel seemed to resist the coming light. The whispers intensified, mingling with the residual growls from the lot and the echo of shadows that had moved in impossible ways. I understood then that following the rules wasn't just about obedience. It was about survival. In room 5, whatever was behind that door was the ultimate test. By the time Luna's footsteps sounded in the hallway, I was trembling, gripping the desk like a lifeline. I had survived, but the pull of room 5 lingered in my mind, and I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The last hour of the night felt endless. The motel seemed alive in ways I hadn't fully realized until now. A breathing, patient entity that measured fear and hesitation as precisely as a predator stalking prey. My legs were stiff, my back aching from hours of sitting behind the desk, but exhaustion didn't matter. Survival did. The shadow from the hallway earlier had returned, but this time it lingered near the door to room 2. My stomach knotted at the sight. It wasn't moving, just standing or hovering, silent and patient, like it was waiting for me to make a mistake. I gripped the flashlight, but even its beam seemed powerless against the darkness. Then a soft tapping echoed from the office door. Tap, tap, tap. My head snapped toward it. The emergency key gleamed in my pocket like a promise I didn't understand. I considered using it, but Luna's words burned in my mind. Hopefully nothing you'll ever need to know about. I stayed put, forcing my trembling hands to the desk, whispering the rules over and over. Do not investigate. Do not approach the dogs. Even rooms only. My pulse was deafening. Every sound, the wind rattling the pine trees, the faint drip from the sink, the hum of the fluorescent lights was amplified, each one a warning. At 6:55 a.m., I heard it, a whisper, low and melodic, emanating from room 5. My stomach churned violently. I didn't want to hear it, didn't want to acknowledge it, yet the sound wrapped around my mind like a living thing, pulling at curiosity I had fought all night. Come closer, look inside, you know you want to. I felt sweat bead on my forehead as the hallway seemed to stretch, elongating unnaturally. The shadow near room 2 twitched and then dissipated into the carpet, leaving only the echo of its movement. My hands gripped the desk so tightly I thought my fingers would snap. Outside, the lot was quiet, but I could feel the residual presence of the dogs. They weren't prowling anymore. They were waiting, patient, tethered to something I couldn't comprehend. Their growls echoed in my chest, resonating through bone and muscle. The clock ticked closer to 7:00 a.m. My heart hammering, I reminded myself of the mantra, follow the rules, survive, live, obey, no deviation. And then I realized something that chilled me to the core. The motel didn't just observe the rules, it created the rules. Everything about this place, every shadow, every whisper, every impossible shape existed to test obedience. I exhaled, shallow, trembling. 1 minute remained until the shift ended. 1 minute until I could escape the night alive, or at least what passed for alive here. The final 60 seconds stretched like hours, each one thick with anticipation, dread, and a silent warning. One misstep, and the motel would claim me, just as it had claimed Devon. The last few minutes before 7 a.m. were unbearable. Every shadow seemed to stretch and pulse, every creak of the office floor echoing like a footstep approaching. The air had thickened, hot and metallic, carrying the faint, lingering scent of chlorine from the pool, and something else, something ancient, wet, and rotten. Room 2 remained quiet on the monitor, but I could sense it, a presence, watching, waiting, testing me. My fingers trembled as I gripped the edge of the desk, the emergency key cool against my palm. The shadow from earlier had returned, more solid now, its edges rippling as if the darkness itself had taken a shape. My breath came shallow and fast. Then a soft scraping from the office door. The dogs were back. I didn't see them immediately, but I felt their eyes piercing through the glass, through the walls, through me. Low growls vibrated in my chest, synchronized with the whispers emanating from room 5. The motel was alive, and it was finally converging every threat of the night into this moment. Rule by rule, I repeated them silently. Do not investigate. Check the pool. Even-numbered rooms only. No room 5. Do not approach the dogs. My teeth clenched as the whispers grew louder, unintelligible but urgent, insistent, almost calling my name. Then the monitors flickered. Room 5's door appeared to pulse, expanding and contracting like a breathing lung. I could hear the scraping again, closer this time, coming from the hallway. My chest tightened, fear clawing at my throat. Something moved in the shadows, slithering across the floor with unnatural speed. I gripped the desk and forced myself to stay put. One misstep, one moment of hesitation, and the motel would take me. Devon hadn't resisted the pull, hadn't obeyed fully, and that had been the end of him. The dogs emerged from the shadows outside the office, towering, impossible, their white eyes reflecting every flicker of light. Their growls mingled with the whispers, a cacophony that pressed on my mind, urging surrender. And then, just as the clock ticked to 7:00 a.m., everything stopped. Silence crashed over the motel like a wave. The shadows froze. The whispers vanished. The growls dissipated. It was as if the motel had finished its test and decided I had survived, for now. I slumped in the chair, trembling, drenched in sweat. My hands shook, my chest heaving. I had made it through the night, obeying every rule, following every instruction, but I knew the motel had marked me. The shadow, the dogs, room 5, they were patient, and the night wasn't over. The morning light began to creep into the office, weak but persistent, signaling the end of the shift. I had survived. but the memory of the night would never leave. By the time the first pale light of dawn spilled across the office floor, exhaustion had settled deep into my bones. My eyes were dry, my throat raw from repeated shallow breaths. I had survived the night, obeyed every rule, and still the motel lingered in my mind like a living thing, its presence pressing down on me. Luna returned promptly at 7 a.m. as if nothing had happened, carrying her purse and a coffee cup. Her blue eyes scanned the office and rested on me. "You made it," she said simply. No relief in her voice, no congratulations, just acknowledgement. The way she said it carried weight. Surviving wasn't victory here. Survival was temporary. "You did well," she continued, but then her gaze sharpened. "Do you want to know why the rules exist?" I nodded slowly, too drained to speak. She gestured for me to follow her into the small apartment behind the office. The apartment smelled faintly of old wood and lavender, a sharp contrast to the metallic scent of the night. She sat at a small table and began her story. "The Pineview Motel has been here since 1962, she said. It wasn't always this, haunted. But some things came here, some things that were never meant to be disturbed. Guests, employees, anyone curious about the wrong doors, the wrong rooms, the wrong creatures, they don't come back." I listened, my hands still shaking from the night. Luna pulled a faded photograph from her desk drawer, a man with kind eyes standing in front of the motel in the 1970s. "That's Harold Finch, the first night manager who noticed something wrong about room 5. He lasted only 6 months before disappearing. Then there was Devin." She paused. "He tried to understand, to push boundaries, and, well, you saw what happened." I felt cold. Every story, every warning, every rule made sense now. The motel wasn't just haunted, it was alive, sentient, and predatory. The rules weren't suggestions, they weren't policies, they were survival instructions crafted by those who had learned, often too late, the truth. "The dogs," I whispered almost to myself. "They're not dogs," Luna said, her tone steady but grave. "Never approach them. They see everything, sense fear, and protect whatever is bound to the motel. Room 5, room 2, they are gates, Donald. Gates to things you do not want to meet." I swallowed hard. "So, Devin, he just disappeared?" Luna shook her head. "No one knows. But it's not about being careless, it's about curiosity. The motel punishes curiosity. That's all." I sat in silence, staring at the photograph. The night replayed in my mind. The shadows, the dogs, room 5. And I realized something terrifying. Surviving one night didn't mean I was safe. It meant I was marked. The motel would be watching, waiting, and testing me again. The morning light filtered weakly through the blinds, but it brought no comfort. The events of the night were etched into my mind, shadows in the hallway, the dogs in the lot, the pull of room 5. Even with Luna explaining the motel's history, the truth remained elusive. The Pineview Motel was alive, sentient, and testing me. And I wasn't sure I knew the rules well enough to survive what came next. Around 8 a.m., the first guests began to trickle in. Even-numbered rooms only, I reminded myself, repeating the rules silently. My hands were still shaky as I handed out keys, making small talk with truckers and weary travelers. Their presence should have felt reassuring, but it didn't. Every conversation carried an undercurrent of dread, as if the motel itself hovered over their heads, listening, judging. At 10 a.m., I heard a sound from the lot, a soft scratching, low and deliberate. My heart skipped. The dogs, they weren't prowling this time. They were circling, waiting. But now, they weren't alone. Something moved along with them, a shadow I hadn't seen before, one that bent light around it and seemed to glide without touching the ground. I backed into the office, gripping the desk, forcing myself to breathe. This wasn't night, wasn't dark, and yet the motel's influence reached into the light hours as well. My pulse pounded as I reminded myself, do not approach. Follow the rules. By noon, I decided to check the pool out of routine. Not for the rule, but for survival. I opened the gate and stepped onto the wet concrete. The water was still and black, reflecting nothing. Then, a ripple, slow, deliberate. Something beneath the surface moved, something that shouldn't exist. I froze. The ripple spread, forming shapes that twisted and writhed and vanished as if they had never been there. Returning to the office, I realized the motel wasn't just alive. It was intelligent. It remembered every action, every fear, every hesitation. The night's horrors weren't random. They were tests designed to probe my limits. The dogs, room 5, room 2, they weren't attacks. They were examinations. By evening, my mind was frayed. I could feel the motel observing me, waiting for a single misstep. I understood now that the rules weren't just survival instructions. They were the only barriers keeping the motel from consuming me entirely. And I was beginning to fear that surviving one night meant nothing, that each night would escalate, demanding more, pushing further into terror. I sat in the office, hands clasped, staring at the security monitors. Each camera feed was a reminder. The motel was patient, it was sentient, and it would never stop testing me. By late evening, the Pine View Motel had become unbearable. Even in the light of day, the shadows stretched long and impossible, curling around the edges of the office, the hallways, the rooms themselves. My eyes were bloodshot, my muscles aching, but I couldn't stop watching. The motel didn't just wait, it calculated. Every shadow, every creak, every whisper was part of its design. It began subtly. A low hum from room 5, almost musical but distorted. I froze, gripping the edge of the desk. I hadn't approached, hadn't looked, but I could feel it, radiating through the walls, vibrating under the floorboards. The pull was undeniable. My pulse raced. The room wasn't just haunted, it was sentient. It knew I was observing. It knew I feared. Then the monitor flickered. Room 5's door appeared to breathe, expanding slightly with every pulse of the screen. The whispering came again, so soft, so insistent, threading into my mind, curling around my thoughts. Come closer, look inside. My chest tightened, sweat cooling on my skin. I repeated the mantra silently, clinging to the rules like a lifeline. Do not investigate. Do not investigate. But the motel wasn't satisfied with waiting. The shadow from the hallway returned, stretching impossibly, limbs bending in ways that made my stomach churn. It moved toward the office, slow but deliberate. Behind it, a ripple of darkness expanded, reaching down the corridor toward the rooms. My hands shook as I clutched the emergency key, my only uncertain protection against the unknown. Then came the dogs. They didn't growl this time, they watched, eyes glowing white, teeth glinting, unmoving but alive, aware. I realized with a surge of terror that they were the motel's sentinels, guarding the boundaries, testing the limits of my obedience. A single thought pierced through the fear. If I faltered, even for a moment, the motel would consume me. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe too heavily. Every instinct screamed to flee, but I forced myself to obey. To survive. The whispering intensified. The shadow drew nearer. Room 5 pulsed as though alive, as though breathing, its dark energy extending into the hallway. The air became thick, metallic, suffocating. My vision tunneled, every sense attuned to the impossible rhythm of the motel's power, and then, just as the clock edged closer to the next hour, everything stopped. Silence slammed down, heavier than the noise, oppressive and omnipresent. Room 5 stood closed, the hallway empty, the dogs in shadow vanished. I was alive. I understood now. Room 5 was not a room, it was a threshold, and surviving one night had only proven that I could obey. But the real test, the true confrontation, was yet to come. Night descended like a warning, not gentle, not gradual, more like a curtain of black dropped over the sky, swallowing the horizon in a single breath. Standing alone in the office, I felt the shift immediately. The Pine View wasn't waiting tonight, it was preparing. At 11,003 p.m., the lights flickered, once, twice, then steadied. The rules paper on the counter rustled even though the air was still. My chest tightened. This wasn't wind. This wasn't tension. I glanced at the security screens. Everything was normal until it wasn't. Room 2's door cracked open by itself, just an inch, just enough to show darkness. But the darkness wasn't empty. It crawled, slowly, deliberately, like it was aware that I was watching. I tore my eyes away, pulse pounding. Obey the rules. Don't investigate. Don't look longer than you have to. But room 2 wasn't the only problem. At 11,009, a guest arrived. A lone woman in a long gray coat stepped into the office, her face pale and expression blank, as though she were reading from a script she didn't choose to follow. Her voice was soft but precise. I want room 5. My breath caught. Rule 4. Never give room 5. Always redirect to room 8. I'm sorry, I said, trying to steady my voice. Room 5 is unavailable. I can offer you room 8 and a complimentary breakfast. Her head tilted slowly, too slowly. No, I need room 5. Her eyes were wrong, deep, bottomless, reflecting no light. A cold sensation crawled up my spine. I can't give you that room, I whispered. Something behind her shifted. A long shadow slid along the floor, curling around her feet like a leash. The lights dimmed again. Then she smiled, a small, chilling curve of her lips. And before I could react, she turned and walked out of the office without another word. But she didn't head toward room 8. She walked straight toward room 5. The hallway lights blinked out one by one as she moved, as though the darkness was guiding her. My breath hitched as she reached the door. She didn't knock. She didn't turn the handle. The door opened for her. A cold rush of air poured out, and some presence, stretched into the hall like a hand welcoming its owner home. Then the door slammed shut. The motel went still. Too still. I stared at the monitors, dread spiraling through me. The rules weren't broken. They were bent by something that knew them better than I did, and room 5 wasn't sleeping anymore. It was awake. And hungry. The office felt impossibly small as the night stretched on. Shadows clawed at the edges of the room, twisting and stretching like living things. The fluorescent light above hummed erratic, as if it knew the rules had failed me, or perhaps it knew I had failed myself. I could hear it first, the whispering, low, rhythmic, impossible to locate. Room 5, room 2, the lot, the pool. Every corner of the motel was alive tonight, pressing against me, testing me, waiting. The dogs were outside the office again, their eyes glowing white, unmoving yet omniscient. Their growls resonated through the floor, through my chest, through my very bones. Then the shadow appeared, solid this time, thick, bending light around it like a black flame. It moved without sound, sliding across the office floor toward me. Panic surged. My instincts screamed to run, to bolt, to abandon the rules entirely, but Luna's warnings thundered in my mind. Follow the rules, Donald, or disappear like Devin. I gripped the emergency key like a lifeline. My hand shook violently. The whispering rose to a crescendo, incoherent yet undeniable, a chorus of hunger, curiosity, and malice. Room 5 pulsed again, a breathing, living entity at the far end of the hallway, and then she appeared. The woman from earlier, pale and silent, standing just beyond the edge of the light. She didn't move, didn't speak. She simply extended a hand, as if inviting me into the dark maw of the room that had claimed so many before. I hesitated. One misstep, 1 inch forward, and I would vanish like Devin. My heart pounded so hard I thought the floorboards would shatter beneath me. And yet something deeper, primal, screamed at me. Observe! Survive! Obey! I held my ground, repeating the rules silently, prayer-like, letting them guide my trembling body. The shadow recoiled slightly. The whispering softened. The growls faded. Room 5 pulsed but did not open. Minutes stretched into eternity. The motel tested me relentlessly, but I survived by doing the impossible. Nothing. I obeyed. I waited. I endured. When the first pale light of morning finally spilled across the office floor, the presence outside the office dissipated. The dogs retreated to the shadows. The whispering ceased. The hallway and room 5 were still, silent, obedient. I slumped in my chair, shaking, drenched in sweat, but alive. Luna appeared quietly in the doorway, her expression unreadable. You mean? Not congratulations, just acknowledgement. Survival, she reminded me, was never permanent. The Pine View Motel had marked me tonight. I had obeyed, endured, and survived. But the rules were not finished. The shadow, the dogs, room 5, they were patient, and the motel would always be waiting. And I knew, deep in my bones, that when night fell again, the rules would demand more. I was alive. For now.